I did a little bit of shading off camera just around the temples and a little bit around the brow, where the brow meets the nose, and right on the side of the eye. But now I'm going to go in and do a little bit more. I just want to point out that the shading I do on the skin is all done with a diagonal hatch. That means that my stroke is angled, and I'm doing it pretty lightly. I don't want to go too heavy on the skin tone. I just want to lightly suggest it. And most of the shadows that I put in are form shadows. So they're not going to have a hard edge. They're going to dissolve into the gray of the paper. So what you want is almost like a smoky look where the red just fades into the gray. And now I'm going into the iris and I'm darkening that. I'm trying to get the pupil. Now the pupil on this model was kind of obscured because the iris is so dark. So you're going to see that happen on this drawing too. And then just like before, it's important that you darken the top lid. The top lid is almost always going to be darker than the bottom lid due to the amount of eyelashes on that top lid. Pretty much the top lid is the only place you're getting sort of an outline on this drawing. Every other area, like including the eyebrow, there is no outline. I'm just shading using a diagonal hatch to do that. So it's important that you don't have heavy outlining. If you do, it's really going to flatten your drawing. And the goal here, of course, is to do a representational drawing, which means it looks realistic. It has volume to it. So we're thinking more in terms of volume and mass than flat shapes. And I do want to be sensitive that I don't shade over where I'm planning on putting my highlight. Now there is a little bit of shadow in the eye, just like we did the other day with this sphere that is an eyeball. Same thing that's going on here. The left side is in shadow. The right side is more illuminated, but it goes back a tiny bit to shadow, which is why I'm using a little bit of a light shade on that right side of that eye. Now one thing that I do while I work is I check the value relationships. How one value relates to another. How dark is the white of the eye compared to that top lid? And I make adjustments. And I make sure to step back and look at the drawing as a whole too, so I can look and see if there's any areas that need to be lightened, anywhere that needs to be darkened, and how the overall picture is coming together. I'm going to go ahead and treat the eye that's on the right in the same fashion that I did to the one on the left. So I'm darkening up the iris. I'm moving the highlight over a little bit because I want it more centered. And I'm going to reposition that. And you can see I have to erase out. So I'm stamping down with a corner of my kneaded eraser. It is very important that you keep the kneaded eraser within the plastic bag, that you don't set that down on the easel shelf because it will get dirty. Also, if you have shavings from a pencil sharpener, if you set your kneaded eraser down on those shavings, it will ruin the kneaded eraser. There is a little bit of a pocket beneath this eye. Now, most people have a little bit of a pouch there, and it doesn't matter the age, there's just a little bit of a bulge there. So that's what I'm shading here. But you have to be really careful that it's not outlined. I'm shading using a diagonal hatch, so I never draw in a line there. I'm doing it all with shading. If you put in a line there, you're going to make your person look really old and haggard. So we're going to avoid that. And it's a soft stroke when you put down the shading on that pocket. Just like you see, I'm using a soft stroke here to do some shading around the eyebrows. When doing the top part above the eyebrows, so technically the forehead, that area is like a sphere as well. So you have to treat it like a sphere or similar to a cylinder, where it's dark on the sides and then fades to the gray of the paper in the middle. That's why it was so important that we did that gradient exercise, because there are so many gradients on a face, and it's important that you get that. Now is my favorite part of the drawing process. It's putting in those highlights, and something happens when you add white. It just pops things. So I go right to my most important highlight, which is that sparkle within the eye. I'm going to let that be the brightest value on this drawing, is that sparkle within the eye. So that is the highlight of most importance. There are other areas where you will place white, but be sensitive to the white. Here there's a highlight just below the iris. The whites of the eye are not as bright as that highlight. So that's going to require you to put less pressure on your pencil. And again, I kind of use a diagonal hatch, or I sometimes curve in around the eye when I'm doing the whites of the eye. By the way, on the shadow side of the eye, I'm not going to put a whole lot of highlight. Now there is a little bit of a highlight catching the upper lid on that eye on the right side. And you kind of have to squint your eyes to see where highlights are. So there's a little bit of a light spot there, not as bright as the white of the eye. So there's kind of a hierarchy amongst the white too. So please don't use the same degree of bright white everywhere. I want you to soften it. Like right here, right along the eye socket, there's a light area, but it is very pale. So I'm not going to press very hard. You probably can't hardly see it on the camera, but it's there. So I'm going to any place that needs a highlight. And I make adjustments. I don't put away my red pencil permanently while I'm doing this, because sometimes I realize, oh, I need to adjust that. I need to make this look correct. So putting in the white helps me address other areas of the drawing too. Even on the forehead, there's going to be a little bit of white in the middle. And again, you're kind of thinking of that forehead as somewhat between a cylinder and a sphere in terms of form. It's a hybrid. Again, not punching it as bright as I possibly can go. And you can see that I've left quite a bit of the gray of the paper exposed. Now that's something I want you to do too, that you want that gray of the paper to serve as a mid-tone value. So anywhere you have a mid-tone on your drawing, let the gray of the paper show. I'm going to go ahead and stop now. So far, there's at least 2.5 hours into this drawing, but if this was going to be a finished piece, I'd probably put more time in.